that felt unsafe, where you felt like things were chaotic and you thought anything might happen? I don't know about you, but I hate that feeling. And I had a few different places that I felt that. A lot of times it was in my house, sometimes it was in my classroom. And whether you realize it or not, your classroom might be a place that your kids feel unsafe. So let's think about that for a moment. I want to ask you a few questions. Number one, do you realize one of the main things that kids need to feel safe is predictability? Okay, you've got to make sure that your kids, I'm going to write this up here, okay, they know what's going to happen. When your kids feel like they know what's going to happen, it is called predictability. That means like when you wake up in the morning, you know what's going to be around you physically. You think about the covers that's on you. You think, look over, you see your light. You might have a window. You look out the window and the sun is up, hopefully. So, or maybe it's down still, but you know what's coming. Okay, it's predictable. That's the way that God has made this world. The predictability of God is what helps us to know that everything's going to be okay. Now, God never changes. He's yesterday, today, tomorrow, and forever. And that same kind of predictability is what your kids need in order to feel safe. There's no way around it. So I want to ask you another question. Do your kids feel safe in your classroom? Do they? Do you have predictability? Is it going to be a common routine one week after another? And number two, do you realize that kids can't learn when they don't feel safe? That's really simple. Everybody knows that. There's a lot of stuff, a lot of research on that, that if you don't feel safe, your brain, the front part of your brain where all the learning takes place, you can't get there if you're nervous about what's actually going to happen. That's the way God has made us. We have to feel safe before we can learn. Okay, otherwise our eyes are open. We're looking around, making sure things are safe before we jump into things. And number three, do you realize that you are the one in your classroom? If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, wherever your classroom is, because you can teach kids at home, you can teach kids in a classroom, you can teach kids on the field, whatever program you're a part of. You are the one who can help set the tone in your classroom. And if your kids don't feel safe, you might not even know it. You might be, everything's fine. I'm okay. It's no big deal. I feel fine. Well, you know what? You're not the only one in your classroom. You have to make sure that your kids feel safe. The way you can do that is really simple. So let's talk about those things in just a minute. So number one, uncertainty breeds anxiety. Let me say it again. Uncertainty breeds anxiety. Kids crave structure. Okay, they drink it in. Okay, just like a baby drinks in milk. Kids need that structure, even when they push against it. I'll tell you this: in my classrooms, in my any place that I've ever taught, I have the same kind of thing that happens often. It's that kids in my classroom, they come against me hard at first, but once they recognize that I set the boundaries, I set the routine, I set the habits that happen daily, they always rise up to it. Okay, this predictability is achievable when you're the one who's in control. So I want you to take a moment and think about a time in your childhood where you had an unpredictable environment. I'll tell you one of mine. So what happened with me is I remember every morning when I was a little kid getting up. I remember being 7 years old, and I would wake up and no one would be home. My mom, she had to go to work. She couldn't help it. Okay, she's got to go to work. I'm not mad at her, but she at 5 a.m. she would get up, lace up her boots, and go to work. She was a plumber. And so my mom and dad were both plumbers. They met at plumbing school. So I used to tell the joke about if a man and a woman meet at plumbing school, what do you get? You get me. Okay. So that's what happens. But anyway, she'd get up at 5 a.m. She'd go to school or go to work. My brother and sister were 7 and 9 years older than me. They were supposed to watch out for me. I don't remember what they were doing, but I know that they weren't there when I woke up. And so every morning I would wake up. The only predictability I had was that no one would be there. And I remember looking around, and I never had a routine in the morning. I never had procedures. I never had any sort of continuity day to day. It would be just whatever time I happened to get up. I remember one time at 7 a.m., the bus being out front, honking at the door and saying, "Here, come on, let's go, let's go." I seldom missed the bus, but for whatever day that was, I woke up and just rushed out the door. didn't brush my teeth, didn't comb my hair, didn't even change my clothes. Sometimes I just fall asleep in clothes from the day before. Okay, that was chaotic. Instead, one of the best things that you can do is you can establish a routine. Okay, and we're going to talk about what a routine really is here in a little bit. Okay, a routine and what that stands for. Now, a routine has to do with predictability. It's all about what's going to happen, what you do first, what you do second, what you do third. Okay, and there's always a triggering event. A triggering event, something that happens that initiates the 1, 2, 3. Okay, then after that, you can have a new predictable routine. So, for instance, in the mornings, one of the best things that you can do in my own life and in my own classrooms, but is when you first wake up, what do you do first? And so you would put this. Let's see. You would put this wake up. Okay. So you've got your wake up. So when you wake up, what happens next? So first thing that happens when you wake up is maybe you get a drink of water. Get a drink. Maybe you have a drink right next to the restroom area, or maybe you use a restroom. I don't know. I have a little special like drinking fountain or whatever it is by my restroom. And so I always get a drink. Number 2, I use the restroom. Okay. And then I actually have my declarations. I have some morning declarations. They're actually on the wall in my restroom so that I know that first I get the drink, I use restroom, I have my morning declarations. Those are like the 3 first things that I do when I first wake up. And so in your life, you probably have certain routines. And remember, just so you know, each one of these, this is a habit. So if you're in the habit of getting a drink every morning, it'll keep you from getting dehydrated. If you're in the habit of using the restroom every morning, it'll help keep you regular. Okay. And if you're in a habit of doing morning declarations, or some people call them lots of different things, but they're just sentences that you read or that you look at or that you say out loud. I can't think of the word right now, but anyway, I call them declarations. These are habits. So when you have 3 habits in a row, then that's a routine. Okay. So what you want to do is in your own classroom is you want to develop certain habits that the kids have when they first walk into the classroom. That's your triggering event. And so instead of wake up, it might be come into the classroom. So what happens first? What happens second? What happens third? These are important because the brain's first priority is survival. God has created you like that to be able to withstand and come against any attacks that come at you. That's why Jesus, whenever Peter was standing in front of Jesus and Jesus said, put down the sword. Because if you remember, what happened is Jesus and all of his disciples were being attacked by the Roman soldiers. And what did Jesus say? Peter said, pulled out the sword. He said, let's go, buddy. I got this. I'm ready. I'm going to defend you to the end. And Jesus said, no, wait a minute. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Put it down. Because it's instinctual for us to fight or flight, take off running. Because the second part of the verse says that all the other disciples took off running. So some people were ready to fight, some people were ready to run. We got that fight or flight. In the Bible, it shows us that example. But Jesus said, no. What am I going to do? Fight against what God has for me? No, I'm going to take this on. So you have to rise above those instincts of fight or flight. What that means is if your kids don't feel safe, they're going to do one or the other. They're going to either, sometimes they run, but because they're stuck in the classroom, they can't run very far. So what they do is they start to shrink down. Okay. You ever had some of those kids who are in your classroom and that's what they do is they shrink down small. Where's my eraser? There it is. Okay. Got my eraser here. I'm going to erase this because I'm going to give you guys a couple of different examples. One of the things that you're going to need to do is to learn that if you don't feel safe, how do your kids respond? Okay. Your kids, the other day, I'll tell you a story. One of the girls in my classroom, you could tell that she didn't, well, it wasn't my classroom, it was actually a friend of mine, but we were all together. She came in and she was really nervous because it was odd. The routine wasn't the same. We had a weather situation in my classroom or at my school. And so all the kids had to come together and she walked in the door and it was different than normal. She's looking around and you could tell that there was a certain unsafe feeling that she had. She felt she was unsure about her environment, which happens very often with kids when you're outside of the normal routine. Okay. When you don't have your typical habits. So she walked in, and I knew and I recognized that she felt unsafe, and another teacher did too. And the teacher ran up to her, was like, "Here, come here, let me help you. This is what's going on." And she explained why we were there. They said there's a weather situation because it was so cold that all of us are coming to the classroom here. Normally we stay outside, but right now we're all together. Does that make sense? And the kid's like, "Yeah." She's like, "Okay, well, come on over here. We've got some stuff you can do." She said, "Okay." And so once she understood why the situation, the routine was different, then she was able to move forward. That's why one of the most powerful things that you can do for your kids is just to recognize their feelings and then explain why. Okay. So that's one of the routines that I have for when you notice a kid feels unsafe, is just recognize the feeling and then identify with it and then provide a reason for it. Okay. So when kids feel unsafe, they can't learn. Number 3 here, I want to encourage you guys a little bit, or at least take a moment and think about a visual. Think about your kid, about your brain whenever you feel unsafe. Okay. I'm going to draw a quick picture here. Another one. When you feel unsafe, what do you do? What do you think your brain looks like? Take a moment and literally think about to yourself, what is it like when you feel unsafe? Okay. I know with me, like in my own heart, I put my hands up right away. Okay. So here, I'm going to draw a picture of a heart. Okay. And it's got hands. Okay. Here's my hands. And it tries to push people away. That's my hands with heart. Okay. That's my heart. So I'm pushing you away. That's what it feels like. Okay. You're like, "Oh, get away from me." Or sometimes you might just take off running. Okay. This might be you where you want to push people away. But some people, like my friend the other day, she's got legs and she wanted to run away. Phew, phew, phew. Okay. That's basically it. You're going to either run away or you're going to fight. You're going to push up against the situation or you're going to run away from the situation. Now, there was another kid, because there was another kid in my classroom, and he came in and he felt the same way, but he responded completely different. He walked in, and instead of shrinking down, he was like, "This is weird. What's happening?" Okay. And he started to lash out. He wanted to be like, "Hey, what's going on? Hey, what are we doing?" And you could tell that he was like overwhelmed. So one of the things that's crazy is the root for both of these, okay, might still be this feeling of being unsafe. So in your classrooms, you want, above all else, for your kids to feel safe. This is one of the 3 things that are most important in your classroom for the kids to feel, is a feeling of safety. The other 2 are to feel loved or cared for. Okay. And the other one is to feel important. Okay. Sometimes important or smart sometimes is kind of, but that's really when you feel smart, that makes you feel important. So it's really all about being important, safe, and loved or cared for. And this is sometimes referred to respect. Okay. So you'll find a lot of times that your men, everybody wants to feel safe. Your boys want to feel respect first and cared for second. And then oftentimes your girls want to feel after feeling safe, they want to feel love first and important or respected second. So it doesn't matter. Either way, all 3 of them are important. All 3 of them are necessary. So in your classroom, no matter what, you want to make sure they have these. But today we're going to focus on feeling safe. So what can you do? Because the good news is you set the tone. Okay, you are the anchor in your classroom. One of the ways that you can help your kids feel safe is simply by following a routine, like I shared earlier. So we're going to take a moment and think about the classroom routine that you want to establish. The best way that you can have predictability in your classroom is to have the same routine when you start. Now, if you want to change things up after a little while, that's okay. But it's really good, it's even better to have a schedule. Your schedule is your routine over time. Okay, so you don't always have to have your schedule that's exact, like super rigid. Okay, what you don't want to do necessarily is have it super hard lines that, like, hey, I don't care what you're doing right now, you're going to stop what you're doing and you're going to do this. Okay, like 10 o'clock, we do this no matter what. 10:15, we do this no matter what. 10:30, we do this no matter what. Don't do that. That's a good way to cause chaos. Okay. Instead, what you do is you have a general flow. Okay. You have the routine is all about, okay, we've got your triggering event. Then you have the first thing that you do. followed by the second, followed by the third. And these are normally in blocks. Okay, so this would be one block of stuff that you do. Then after that, you'd have a new routine. You go, okay, now we're going to do this. 2, 3. And so you change. And then again, your flow is what your routine is all about. Okay, so you've got your first thing's this, then it goes into this. Then you've got this goes into this. Okay. Once you're done with that, then you've got your new triggering event. Then you have this item goes into this one, and this goes into this. So let's see what that looks like. So in a classroom, really simple, in your classroom, let's say you work at, like at my church, one of the best things that you can do is when you walk in, okay? So you walk in the classroom, everybody should have something that happens right when you first walk in a classroom. In ours, we have a coloring sheet. Okay. Now we do let kids, especially if you've got young kids, we have other stations available. Okay. So for instance, we might have the blocks available, but the coloring stations are out. We might have music available, but the coloring stations are out. So that's sort of the first thing you want to do is when you first walk in, we have stations available and we have one center station that makes things most simple. Then from there, after that, we have our book reading or we have our Bible. So we've got coloring first when the kids are all coming and they're saying hello and you're introducing yourself. And then after a little bit of time, now typically what you want to do is keep your finger on the pulse of the classroom. And if everybody seems pretty engaged in the coloring and in the stations, you can let this last a little bit longer. You might have an idea of, okay, this is 10 to 15 minutes. Now, if everybody gets done in 5, fine, we're going to move right along. Okay, we can always go a little bit earlier. If you're saying, okay, you know what, things are going pretty smooth, you might go a little bit longer than 10 minutes. You might go up to 15. I wouldn't stick around here forever because you want to get into the meat of your classroom. And then that's where you have your Bible. Your Bible is you would read the stories to the kids at the table. So you bring all the kids over. You're like, all right, kids, here, come on. Let's come on over here. And we're going to read our Bible story. And then you get going. Now, again, with the Bible, what I like to do is you have some sort of sound. I don't know if I mentioned this yet. Actually, I know I didn't. But it's always good to have a sound. Okay, and a visual for transitioning. Now, this is just a small transition. So color, Bible, you'd be like, okay, kids, a quiet sheep, ready, go. That's what I normally do is I hold up a thumb like this for quiet sheep because it looks like a little sheep, right? No, maybe, I don't know. Whatever you want to do for your transition. Okay, ready to go. You can even have a little sound. We have a little song that you can sing for it's time for the Bible. So you just put that song on and then all the kids know what to do. You practice routines, practice these procedures. So they go right from coloring into the Bible. You listen to your story, you read your Bible. And then as you get done with Bible, then you can go right back to whatever's next. For our classroom, we let the kids, when they're done with Bible, they go back to stations. So now with the stations and the coloring, so that right there, that's our whole morning routine. We have our coloring, which this is technically one of the stations, but it's a specific one that we want to set out for the kids. And with the music, I have music up there, but we've also got snack. So the kids are allowed to have snack as one of their stations as well. So you've got coloring, snack, music, blocks. You can go to whichever one you want. Then you come over, you have the Bible time. Everybody does their Bible. Then we go into our stations. Now, once you're done with this, then we have our cleanup. And so that right here, that's our triggering event up here. So cleanup. We have a cleanup song. Okay. We have a cleanup song. Then once we have the cleanup song, because we always clean up throughout the classrooms, it's super important to clean up your classroom. Then we go immediately to worship or music. Worship, music. Okay, we have certain songs, dances, things that we do with the kids. Now, some people ask, do you let the stations continue on? You can. Here's the thing. You don't want to fight with kids, especially if they're 2 years old, 3 years old. Some 4-year-old, you want to try to encourage everybody to start off with your worship and music Come dance with us, make it fun. But the stations can always be there. That's okay. Now, when you have your state, you have your worship music, we go right into prayer right after that. Prayer. Okay, so as music gets done, we immediately go into prayer, and we have special papers. It's actually on the back side of our coloring page that connects it to the prayer. So what's great is we have that right there connected to the prayer. This is the back side of the coloring page. So it's great. You just flip that coloring page right over. Then after prayer, that's whenever we finish up and we have stations again. But what we don't want to do, now one of the biggest things that can make a kid feel unsafe is when you stay in something for way too long and the kids are getting antsy, they're getting upset. Okay, because what happens a lot of times in classrooms, they'll go from coloring to Bible to stations, and then they just ride the stations the whole day. Don't do that. Okay, stations are important. Okay, they are like bumpers on the bowling alley. Okay, they're important to have up. You want the bumpers for little kids so that you can get to where you're going. Okay, they're like the roads in a roadway between buildings, between your house and your work. You've got to have the stations. They allow for you to be some movement for those kids who need a little bit of a break. But if you go straight from coloring to Bible, and that kid really loves the Bible, and you're talking to them the whole time, and then they go straight to worship and then straight to prayer, that's fine. Okay, because my coloring sheets, what we have with our coloring sheets is this is actually our memory verse. Memory verse. So our memory verse and our coloring sheets are the same thing. We have the words of the memory verse tied in with the coloring. So you go from your memory verse or coloring into your Bible stories, into your stations, and if you want, and again, these are all like buffers. These are all like boundaries that you have from one thing to another. Another example is like the beach. Okay, your stations are like the beach. They go straight from the ocean into the beach, into the land. You've got to have those transitions built into your classroom. Then you have your cleanup song. Now the whole classroom's clean. Worship, prayer, stations, and at the very end, if you want to, then you're all done and you can do your cleanup again. And then maybe you have something where you go outside. I always encourage a trip outside, even if you just go for a walk. Take the kids for a walk. You'll be surprised how many cool things can happen when you're outside. You just take a lap around and then you can bring them on. It helps everybody kind of calm down. Use a rope if you need to, whatever you got to have a rope, and you can have little knots on the rope and have the kids follow you around. Super important stuff. But this right here is the predictability of our classrooms, especially in our church. And I want to encourage you to have predictability in your own classrooms as well, because this is what helps kids to feel safe. So I just want to encourage you guys, remember, if you feel like when you're a kid and you felt like out of control, okay, and you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't like this feeling. It's because you didn't have good predictability. It's because there were no routines. It's because you had no good habits established in your classroom, because you had no good habits and routines in your own home life. And so you want to make sure that you set those up in your classroom so that each kid feels safe, they feel loved, they feel respected, and they feel important. You have to do it. And so think about what kind of classroom you want to create, and be sure to like, subscribe, follow, and comment below. I'd love to hear your feelings and your thoughts on this. Thanks so much. Remember, God is with you. Be blessed.